So I told my VP, I'm like, they're actually making a decision. And he said, dude, where is she? And I was like, oh, she's out of South Carolina. And he's like, you need to go there now. Like, you need to go see her now before they make their decision.
You are listening to The Deal Breakdown with Derek Shebby, where we spotlight the best deals out there in B2B sales, from the open all the way to the close. Welcome to the B2B Deal Breakdown podcast, where we give you the play-by-play on some of the best deals out there. I'm Derek Shebby, and I'm excited to be meeting with Paul Salamanca. He's a vice president of sales in the cybersecurity industry and also the co-founder of the Top 1%er, a private sales community. Welcome, Paul.
Hey, Derek. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here. Always great to talk to you, my friend.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you on the show. And it's going to be a real treat for all the B2B salespeople listening in, because you've got tons of experience, and inside of that experience, I know you've closed some amazing deals. So could we start by you telling the listeners a little bit about your background?
Sure. So without boring people too much, I got into sales pretty early. I was in college, the University of Arizona, even though I grew up Northeast, and my dad basically said, hey, I think it's time for you to come home. Your grades aren't the best. My business isn't doing the best. So let's, when you come to college here closer to home. So it forced me to think of a way to create my own business and actually make my own money. And I started creating my first business there, going door to door to local businesses. That grew to a national company, to over 2,200 colleges, universities. So that's where I started to pick up a lot of the skills that I use today, as far as the longer sales cycle, cold calling, and getting to the decision maker, the C-suite, all of that stuff. But it was a learning curve for sure, and I wouldn't have gotten to where I am today if it wasn't for the mentors that I had along the way.
That's awesome. So how many years in total would you say that you've been in B2B sales?
I'd say 16, 17 years. Yeah.
Nice. It's quite a bit of time. And now, now what company are you with now? What industry is it in?
Security Scorecard. We're the leader in the cybersecurity rating space. So we gather all external information on companies. Over 1.4 million companies are in our database, and we grade every company from an A through F. And companies that are rated, it's not an end-all be-all, because we can only see the outside information, but it still gives companies a better picture of another company's cybersecurity posture that they may be doing business with. And we've had third parties come in, validate our data to say, you know what, companies that actually have a security scorecard grade of C or lower are actually 5 times more likely to experience a breach than if you had an A or B.
Wow. That's very interesting. So, I mean, especially right now with the whole the cybersecurity attacks like ransomware going on all around the world.
Yep.
It seems like having a good grade would be something every organization and institution would be wanting to focus on. So I guess in general, outside of assigning companies a grade, what challenges does your specific offering solve for businesses?
So right now, dealing with the Fortune 100, 500, Fortune 1000, these are ginormous companies with thousands and thousands of vendors that they work with. And believe it or not, their team to monitor these vendors are about a half a dozen on average. So 6 people are responsible to mitigate risk across a pool of thousands of vendors. So it's almost impossible, right? They're severely outnumbered. And the way to do that a little bit better is by having something like a security scorecard for all your vendors to say, okay, now where can I prioritize my time to actually start spending my time on those that are a lot more likely to potentially experience a breach. Without us, they're basically taking a shot in the dark, going after vendors that they think are probably their biggest vendors they spend the most time with. So now they're taking more of a calculated approach.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you only have 6 people and you have so many people to manage, so many companies to manage, you obviously don't want to have any sort of breach happen on your watch. And it would be impossible, now that you mention it, to know where to start. So it's very interesting and very relevant to what we're experiencing globally right now. This particular deal that you're sharing today, how'd you choose it?
I wanted to pick a deal that it was my first global deal. It was actually the second global deal in company history. We just went public as a company, and I was getting my feet under me from an enterprise sales rep. I was doing well, but I was not really at the top 1% yet. I felt confident, but not that confident. And this is one of those deals that allowed me to take my game to the next level. And I don't think I've ever looked back since.
Awesome. I mean, I've never personally experienced going from, selling in the US to having to sell international, to sell globally. And so I can imagine that just that step in general and all the different culture, ways or different countries sell culturally has got to be, there's a lot of questions involved, and for it to be one of the first couple deals that really broaden the reach of your organization, it sounds like it's going to be really interesting. So this particular deal that you're choosing, what size are we talking about in terms of like budget? So is it like, did it equate to like 1 month budget or a quarter budget or a full year budget for you?
So this was 5X. It turned out to be 5X my annual quota.
5 times your annual quota.
Yeah.
It was like 5 years in one deal.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty unbelievable right there. So 5X of your annual budget is insane for the size of an order.
That's right.
That's just insane.
Yeah.
So let's really dive in then. Let's figure out how this thing happened. Starting off, how did you identify this company globally, saying this is a target of yours that you're going to go after?
At this time, there were different tiers in the sales structure. I think it was a tier 1 enterprise rep. They go after the largest of the largest. That was a tier right below that. And for whatever reason, this one opportunity slipped through the cracks. Like this one account ended up in my tier where it really should have been the tier above me.
Oh, I love that. I love when that happens.
Yeah, it doesn't happen too often. When I found that out, it was because the SDR who set the appointment came to me and said, "Hey, I just set up a great appointment. It's with this company, and they're going out to RFP for a global RFP." And then we looked into the company and said, "Wow, this is a big ass company. This is great. Great job. Thanks." So immediately we had a next step, which was to prepare for the RFP, and then prepare for an on-site meeting. So at the time in our industry, many companies were touting that they were global companies, a lot of our competitors. And we felt like nobody was truly global. We were the closest thing to global at that point in the industry. So there were a couple of landmines we started to plant, because other competitors, they would maybe open up Regis offices and not have anyone there, but just show that they were quote unquote global, where we legitimately had started to have offices with employees there. One of the things we decided to do is before the RFP started to plant that seed to say, well, if you're going to have a meeting, and if this is the global RFP, pick any country in the world that you want to meet at, and we'll have one of our executives meet you there. And so they picked a country. I forget what country it was, and I had to now call my counterpart. Luckily, we had a counterpart in that country. Kind of took a chance there.
Yeah.
So we had the first meeting, and that was one of the landmines we planted, because they were trying to test to see how global is our company. Are we going to send an American out there? Are we going to send someone local that actually understands the culture there? So that's when I brought in my counterpart, and I prepped him on the meeting. All he had to do was go there and show that, we were prepared to talk about it. So that was phase 1. That happened probably within 30 days of us getting the meeting.
So you get handed this opportunity from the SDR. And then
Correct.
From that point, did you call and set up and have that conversation saying, whereabouts do you want to meet anywhere in the world? Did you have the conversation?
Correct. So, right. They were thinking, that's when I followed up, started to have the conversation with somebody running the RFP. And they were saying that they were thinking about holding a first meeting and just bring everyone in just to get to know everybody. And they were talking about meeting somewhere in the US. And I said, well, if this is global, let's meet anywhere. Why don't you challenge us? And I took a chance too, because we didn't have offices everywhere either.
Right.
But I kind of knew their offices pretty much aligned with our offices.
Yeah.
So I took that chance, and they took my recommendation.
Well, let's pause there, because I think there's a lot of important things you said there that B2B salespeople might not realize. You said landmines. You put a landmine in there, and from that standpoint, you had to have, there was strategy involved with you bringing that up, hey, we're in the world. I know you're saying you're taking a chance, like you just made it up in front of the customer, but you were thinking strategically, how could I put that landmine, knowing that it's an RFP, and separate yourself from the competition. So tell me a little bit more about how you came up with that strategy.
So I knew in every deal, that was one of our biggest differentiators, the global reach. So going into that call, I knew by looking at their website where their offices were around the globe, and I kind of mapped that to our offices. And for the most part, we were a pretty good match. Obviously, they had more offices than we did. So when we started talking, and I asked her to challenge us and everyone else to see if we're really global. You still want to throw out a couple of names too that you kind of prefer. So whether it's in the UK, Germany, you start naming a couple, and you kind of increase your chances that one of those countries that you named will be selected. And she actually selected one of those countries. She went back to think about it and discuss it with the team. But we got the email, I think, a couple of weeks later saying, hey, we're going to invite vendors out to our location in this country. And I forget what country that was.
That's the location that you knew you were at.
Correct. Yeah.
I love it. I just want to highlight that for B2B salespeople listening in, that there's strategy that you thought about beforehand about how you separate yourself from the competition. And on your initial contact with the customer, you wanted to put that strategy in. And when you know that there's a differentiator that you have over somebody else and you want to exploit it, you said it perfectly. It's really putting in a landmine for the other vendors out there. And that's a pro move. That's an experienced move. And so an advanced skill, and it requires thought up front and strategy. So I just want to highlight that. So let's fast forward over to this meeting. So now you have this first actual discovery meeting with the customer. How'd that go?
That went really well. I wasn't on it. Kind of regrouped with my peer, and it seemed to be going well. We were following the RFP timeline after that, and they just went dark. And this was probably in the beginning of the year, and nothing really happened for the rest of the year. And I went on to close other deals, brought in new customers that were not even close to the size of that potential opportunity, but I had a pretty good year. I mean, it wasn't a great year, but I brought in a lot of logos, and it was a lot of landing new accounts ready for the upsell and the expand. And then I think the beginning, the beginning of the following year, I finally get somebody on the phone, or I get an email back from somebody, and this is months, almost a year of not hearing back, to say, oh yeah, we are making our decision very soon, within the next week, we'll let you know. And that was an email. And I said, okay, thanks. Looking back, I could have done so many other things. So I told my VP, I'm like, they're actually making a decision. And he said, dude, where is she? And I was like, oh, she's out of South Carolina. And he's like, you need to go there now. Like, you need to go see her now before they make their decision. And she never picked up the phone. And I called her as soon as he said that. And for some reason, she picked up the phone. And I said, hey, I know we were just exchanging emails, but I'm actually going to be in your area, on Wednesday or Thursday. Would it make sense for us to just grab lunch? And she's like, yeah, sure, no problem. Come on down. So I had no plans of being in South Carolina, right? So that was pretty easy to do. So I'll stop there before I made my trip. But yeah, I got lucky, right? That conversation with my VP happened at such a perfect time. Like, Derek, I was calling this woman a million times throughout the entire year, but this one time I called her, she actually picked up.
Yeah, I think that's sometimes that we joke around, even in leadership with people, says, "Oh, as soon as the boss is watching, they pick up or something," right? Or things, oh, they just happen to be available. Yeah,
Right.
that's normal. So, some questions I wanted to ask though, after the RFP was after you had that first meeting or your colleague had that meeting, was there any sort of next step? Like, was there like a demo of your service? Was there other requirements outside of, meeting their maybe the written RFP that was needed? Like, is there a step in between the proposal that probably happened with the RFP and that meeting?
No, and looking back, it probably was me probably because somebody else was driving the RFP. It was very light. Besides that first meeting we had, there was very little interaction. We were looking to meet with them more often. We were looking to demo more. We were looking to understand their situation more. Just nobody was getting back to us. So
Yeah.
that was it. I mean, we were just following the RFP guidelines, submitted basically a blind proposal that had no coaching on it whatsoever. So I wasn't feeling good about it either.
Right. And that's why you kept prospecting.
How many deals do you win like that where you have one meeting, you go through the RFP process, and you win a deal? None, right? That never happens.
Yeah. Those sort of things aren't anything you count on at all. You try to get a next step and they say no. Well, they go dark for a year. Heck, that right there is enough to say, this thing's still on? I mean, come on. They probably went someone else and forgot to tell you. At this point, she told you she was going to make it. They're making their decision. You flew out there and they've already seen the quote. They've already seen the proposal. They were just cluing you in that they were getting close to making a decision. And you're going like, I'm surprised this is even still happening. And you decide to go fly from New York. Is that where you're at? New York?
Yep.
So you flew from New York to North Carolina.
South Carolina.
So it's not like you driving down the street. Like,
correct.
This was like your boss, like, get on a plane and go out there like now.
Yeah.
So interesting. So tell me about that lunch that you had.
So at first I wanted to meet in the office. I'm not really a lunch guy. I'm not really a dinner guy. And, professionally, unless I actually start doing business with somebody, I don't want them to think like I'm trying to take them out to lunch just to earn their business.
Right.
And it's hard. I think Oren Clef in one of his books, Pitch Anything, I think it was Oren Clef, who talked about never having a business meeting over lunch. You get interrupted so many times by the waiter, by different people. If it's a serious conversation, you want to have that in a boardroom or in a conference room in someone's office. So that's what I was pushing for, but she wasn't, she lived right outside of Pauly Island or something like that. So it was kind of like an excluded little island.
Yeah.
So she's like, let's just meet for lunch. Very casual. I said, all right, fine. So we met for lunch, and going into this lunch, in my mind, we were preparing leading up to this to position our discussion around the competitor that we normally go up against, that we feel like we were competing against. It was just more of a hunch.
Yeah.
So I get there, we have lunch. Waiter asks if I wanted to drink, and sometimes you're like, yeah, should I drink? Should I not? I'm like, yeah, fuck it. I was like, yeah, I'll have a glass of wine. She's like, all right, cool. I'll have a glass of wine then. So then after a couple of glasses of wine, I just started talking. I wasn't trying to talk business. And then I said, we're competing against so-and-so, right? She's like, oh no, it's X, completely different competitor. Shocked me, right? It's usually our number 3 or number 2 competitor.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. Because now that completely changes my angle, my talk track, different landmines,
Right.
our advantages over that company. So I said, okay, that's interesting. And I am like looking at my watch at this point because I have to jump on a flight like in 2 hours, but the conversation's so good. And then she asked, we're kind of wrapping up, and she asked, how long are you in town for? I'm like, oh, I'm going to be here for at least another couple of days. If you want, we could grab dinner just to continue conversations. And she was like, yeah, sure, we could do that. I'm like, all right, great. So I get in my rental car and I call the airline. I'm like, all right, I gotta change my flight, extend it a little bit. So now I have dinner. Now I have dinner set up with this with the woman, yeah, with the prospect, and she was giving me great information at first, but now I could go back and say, all right, it's not this company we're competing against. I started talking to my boss. We're now competing against this company. These are the players involved. I don't know who's on our side, who's not on our side. I will find that out. So then I'll stop there, but that's my day. That's how my day started unfolding. But I was very happy she was open to meet again that night. That's very rare.
Yeah. And the fact that you had to change your flights and everything on the fly, that's a little crazy too. You're thinking I'm going to miss this flight. It's completely going haywire here. But yeah, it sounds like this also is a good thing to mention to all the B2B salespeople listening in, that you've got to be able to have a conversation with people. It's if they don't like you in any sense of the word, you can be the best salesperson. You can be someone that's really getting in and finding out what they need and how to help them do better. But if that factor of someone being able to feeling comfortable with you isn't there, then you are at a disadvantage. And so it sounds like you built up that connection enough for them to say, let's keep this conversation going, because a lot of people would say, hey, listen, I got other things going on. I just wanted to be a quick dinner or a quick lunch so I can be in and out, right? Sometimes a lunch thing it's purposely not about business. So you did a great job building that connection.
Yeah, thanks. It was, to your point, Derek, I felt like one thing I didn't want to do was go into the situation and sound and feel and act like a typical salesperson.
Right.
Start asking about the deal, start going through. So what I wanted to do first was understand about her experience, talk about, how long she was at the company. She's been at the company forever. Just get a sense of like just how long she's lived in South Carolina. And to your point, I was just genuinely interested in her as a person first, and her career and how she got there. And I think she realized like, I'm just not there to sell her.
Right.
And I asked a couple of questions about the opportunity, and then I asked for more time. That was my goal. That was my kind of sales job, is just to get a little more time.
That was your strategy, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like you constantly, at this point in your career, you knew how important it is to make that connection. And some people might say earn the right to keep going, but in general, you knew she knew you're flying out there. She knew
Correct.
You didn't live in South Carolina. She knew you were flying out there specifically, to have this lunch. She respected that. And now you became someone more than someone she spoke to on the phone a few times, and someone that she had seen as, pixels on her computer screen in an email, right?
Yes. So you bring up a good point. I may have even told her that. So initially I told her I had meetings in the area. So I may have even told her that while we were having lunch, to say, I really didn't have meetings. I came here just to see you because this is very important to me. Because we never had a chance to actually get to know each other. And that goes a long way too. I mean, eventually the more human you are, the more honest you are, people could actually relate to that a lot more.
Yeah. And even still, you don't even know how much of a global decision she might have had on this entire deal. She might just be telling you what's going on. She could end up being a champion, or, just someone to let you know where you stood.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right.
There's a lot of risks are taken in there. So, okay. So you rescheduled your flight, or maybe you just told your boss, I'm not sure if I'll even fly out tomorrow or the next day or whatever, because I said it'll be here a couple of days. And you decided to have dinner, and you guys got down to business eventually, right?
Yeah. And that's when you have to buy a little more time. So I asked, is the timeline still going to be within a week? She's like, probably around that time. So if they were going to make a decision within a week, we were going to lose. You don't just not talk to somebody and expect to win a large deal. So my job there was to say, there are a couple of things I would like to. So I understood the key players, at least some of them. And then I asked if it was okay if we could extend this a little bit more. Can we not make the decision within the next week or so? Because what I would really like to do is come back now that I have a better understanding, and then come back here within 2 weeks or a week or two. So she agreed to that, right? So I just bought ourselves a couple more weeks, which seems counterintuitive in a sales cycle. But I knew that was to our advantage.
No, let's pause there again. Because again, this, I know you're saying it like Like you just want, you knew the next step was to extend it out. I know you're saying that, and people listening are going, oh yeah, Paul just wants to just do that. He just knew that was the next step. But people in sales understand that that's the smartest move when they've lost big deals, when they've lost these big deals that are heartbreakers, that you tell everyone it's coming in and you plan on coming in and then you just lose and it hurts.
That's right.
It hurts. And you go, man, why did I lose? And you list all the reasons out why you think you lost. And then you say, next time I have this type of opportunity again, I'm going to make sure I do this, and I do this. And when you, that becomes your new process, but we just call that strategy, but it is experience, and it's, I would say it's advanced skills. And so you're saying like it's nonchalant, but I just want to point out that knowing instinctively you had to extend the sales cycle to give yourself more chances to get more levels up and more back in your favor. That was an advanced skill. So just had to jump in there.
Yeah. And at this point, we're still extremely single threaded, literally. Right? We have one contact that's starting to feel comfortable with us and give us some information on who else is involved. And by the time I got back in front of her again, I made it a point to enjoy my time too, because that became sort of a routine. I go play golf, meet up with her for dinner, fly back, and then the next week do the same thing. And then I started to get a better understanding of different stakeholders. And I remember specifically one time after meeting up with her, the next day I was still in South Carolina playing golf by myself, and then calling my VP out in EMEA and saying, okay, this person out in the Midwest is against us, wants the other company. This person is neutral. This person likes us. So now we had the actual diagram of who's for us, who's against us, why. We didn't really know. We had some information. So then that was fun. I mean, to see everyone come together as a team to say, okay, I actually know her from another company when we used to do business together. I can actually go to the Midwest and at least neutralize her and make her understand why that's important. And we started to do that. We didn't win everybody over, but we started to kind of turn the cards. If they weren't for us, they were at least neutral. And if somebody was against us, they would be completely outnumbered. So that was fun because you started to see that plan in motion. And throughout this process, I kept asking for more time. I said, hey, we still have to. But at this point, I think she knew she was almost on our side. We're on the same side of the table where I was telling her what was going on behind the scenes. I said, oh, my VP of EMEA is actually meeting with Tracy next week. And she's going to talk about these things. Is there anything else we should bring up to make her feel comfortable? And she's coaching us. So at this point, we feel like everything is going great. I'm going out there every week. She invited me to a golf tournament, to like one of the pro tournaments. So I knew I was in great shape. And then it comes to the point where we actually have to deliver a revised proposal, like pricing, because the one we did for the RFP, we've never done a global deal before. It was so tailored to just a US deal, didn't really fit the bill for a global structure. And I didn't know how to do this, but at this point, and this is where being an entrepreneur really helps, people were still, every time you go back to home base, people are running around doing their own thing, right? They still have other deals that they're chasing. And I could have been waiting there forever for someone else to help me. Nobody's done this before. And I started to feel like, I could just wait here because it's not only my job to do this, but other people could help me, right? I could go to my VP. Then I said, fuck it. Let me take the best shot. This is my deal. Let me own this. And I started to create a model on how they could start to roll out within 12 companies, phase 1, another 24 countries, phase 2. And they start rolling out different countries and then figuring out a pricing model, working the terms. And I knew eventually our legal would look at it. I knew eventually like my VP would look at it. But let me take the ball as far as I can until I can't take it anymore. until I'm completely spent. But let me at least show internally what I could do. And that helped a lot because we were under the clock. So I'll stop there. But that's where I started to realize, like, dude, this is my deal. Let me structure it the way where I feel like makes the most sense.
Yeah, I love it. And so, yeah, some things I want to highlight in there too for the B2B salespeople listening in is, again, it's a lot of the things that you did that sound like you just did them naturally. They're advanced skills, and they're skills that come from, again, being battle tested. You lose these deals and you say, I never want that to ever happen again. And so I'm going to make sure I always do this. And some of the things that you did, right, that you just mentioned, were you connected certain people at your company with people at their company strategically to make it easier for this deal to come in. Because hey, this person's going to be a roadblock. No matter how good we do here, this person could kill the deal for us, right?
Yeah.
And you thought about that, and you got so far ahead, and you orchestrated all these things happening, and every single person. What's not being shown here is, or not being talked that much, is you had to sell each person in your company on why they needed to do something with their company. You had to say, this is what I need you to do.
Yep.
This is why it's important. Here's your mission. This is when I need you to get it done. Let me know when it's done. And like there's all of this back things behind the scenes that go into it. And that comes from experience. And so if you are working on a big deal in general, you really have two ways of doing it. One, you can think you're doing really great and then just feel the big heartache and learn from it when you lose. Or you can look at things that Paul's doing here, and it's no question why is in the top 1%, and he's co-founding this private sales community, because the guy knows what he's talking about. He's doing things that you learn from losing big deals, but then winning big deals. And so I think that's those things are fantastic that you mentioned. And so, and even for you to start and think, okay, now we need to think about a proposal. And your proposal was more like, how is this all going to work? And this is a big company. And a lot of times when we have proposals, we have these proposals that the company says, this is how it's supposed to be done. This is the cookie cutter proposal. And you knew from this customer exactly who they were really well by now. You said, well, our standard way of doing these proposals isn't going to work for this company. And I think that's a good goal for anyone listening to this gets to. Do you know your customer well enough to put together something that will grow with them and expand with them, like you did, looking out, about your phase 1 through who knows how large you went up to with all these different countries, but you knew what was the right thing for them. So make sure that you have the courage to create the right thing for your customer like you did along the way. And you don't have to wait for your manager to tell you. You should start and try to figure it out yourself. That's how you learn fast. So anyway, there's a lot of highlights I wanted to say there, just because it's advanced, and it obviously makes sense why you top 1%. But so now you present this idea, present this newly refined quote. Did you have competition at the same time with this quote, or are you just revising your quote of the RFP?
The latter. And I feel like the competition was still there, but at this point, we were making enough traction where we were pretty confident that we were in the lead now. Right? We were being coached. We started to get good signs from the other stakeholders. So now it was just putting a proposal together that made sense. And the numbers, the dollar amount on the deal started to get so big that became secondary to me. Because normally I'm like, is this going to shock the customer? Is this going to shock the prospect? But that came secondary because I was so laser focused on what they really wanted to accomplish, what they were trying to do, the best way to do it, the best way to roll it out in different phases. The numbers were just the numbers. We gave them the best possible deal we could, X amount of countries, and I think it was 50 countries, 42 countries, I don't remember. The numbers are the numbers, and it became a pretty sizable deal. So I wasn't worried about that. And yeah, if you wanted to shave off a little bit here or there, the deal was still going to be gigantic.
Yeah. So you present this quote, and I'm also curious, when you first started going to see her to when you're presenting this quote, how long a time frame did that go by? Because you're extending the sale. How long did that go, if you can remember?
So I think that 1 week when they were supposed to make a decision turned into 6 months.
Okay, but now they know, who knows it better than Paul to, to make a good decision for us. So
Yep.
so you present this quote after 6 months now. Now, how long after you presented the quote did they say, okay, we're moving forward?
Um, Pretty quickly, but the hard part was the legal process. That took a very long time. So when I say pretty quickly, maybe a month, a couple weeks. So all in all, I think so. I ended up closing that deal very end of Q2, early Q3. So it took a full 6, 7 months, and the legal part of it took a good 45, 60 days. So people knew that we were basically going to win this deal internally. It was just, you heard about it every week on the forecast call.
Yeah.
I heard about it every week on the forecast because you're still in legal. Red lines, got to talk about this, talk about that. And then finally the deal came in, man. The deal came in. And when it came in, it was such a great feeling because I was like, wow, all of that, when you do it right, it wasn't about if I'm going to win the deal. It was just a matter of time and being able to do it on time. So I surpassed my annual quota. It was around early Q3. So that put me in such a great position where I was now building pipe for the following year and still closing business in accelerators. And that became my routine for the rest of my career, carrying a bag, whether it was at that company or another company. And for whatever reason, I found a way. It's weird. You don't want to tell people that you're the best salesperson globally at your company, but you find a way to let them know about that. And it's first by the way you carry yourself. And for whatever reason, they ask, how are you doing this year? They give you that little window because they are curious. How are you doing this year? And somehow my SE or somebody tells them, oh, Paul's actually the top salesperson globally in our company. And for whatever reason, they want to buy more from you because they know you are the best at your profession, and you're a professional. So it was really cool to hear, to hear my CEO at the end of the quarter talk about that deal on the earnings call to the analysts, as a publicly traded company, because that was my deal, man. And that was the deal that they highlighted. So I remember being in my kitchen, putting it on speaker, like telling my wife, this is the deal I closed. Yeah, this is my deal right here. She was like, okay, great, honey. That's awesome. But
It is awesome. It is
yeah.
awesome. I mean, I guess when you're looking back on this sort of deal, I'll have two questions here. The first one is, what would you say to summarize were the things that were the critical wins for you in this deal that allowed you to win? And the second question is going to be, what were the few things that were mistakes that you realized you made that you, going back on it, you made sure you never made that mistake again going on these big deals?
Okay. So the key points would be, um, hoping that I could potentially win that deal, where in hindsight, there was no way I would have won that deal if I just waited for their decision. There was so much work in that big deal and any large deal. That's why when I hear other people talk about, oh, this guy's going to get, or this girl's going to get, and this woman's going to get this monster deal that's going to fall in her lap, I'm like, no, she's not. No, he's not. It just doesn't happen that way. There is so much work that needs to go into that size of an opportunity, and understanding that. And that helped me along the way, because even if it's a smaller deal, there's still a lot of work that needs to go into every opportunity.
Right.
I don't know if I would have done anything differently, because I learned along the way, and it wasn't like I wasn't trying to get in front of her, previously. I don't think I would have done anything differently. It just worked out. It worked out the way it was supposed to work out,
Yeah,
if
that's
that
great.
makes sense. Yeah.
No, it does. It was a great deal. And you think about the way that something like this starts as an RFP, and there's a lot of people that are probably listening to this saying, yeah, I deal with a lot of RFPs, but this is an RFP that you ended up shaping, and you ended up coming in and actually redoing. And a lot of times with RFPs, you don't always get that. Especially if you get invited to an RFP and they don't really know who you are. You're just another line item on the spreadsheet. So This is an interesting one to take this big RFP for some big company, and you ended up finding a way to write it after the fact. And I think that's fantastic. So I guess overall, what sort of any final words of wisdom or things to share with the audience that would help them bring more value for their deals?
I would say every flight that I was going to South Carolina, I was reading. I was reading about sales. I was getting better. I was learning. And there was always one little nugget I would get from a book that would help me out in that conversation when I landed. So keep learning, keep reading. And even if you think you know the material, or if you think that book is irrelevant, for whatever reason, you're reading a page at the perfect time for some reason that will help you out.
That's awesome.
And it's happened to me throughout my career.
Yeah. Well,
I feel like I have the advantage. I'm like, man, I'm reading this book now. That's a tip that I wouldn't have gotten if I wasn't reading this book. And I'm like, why doesn't everyone read so much like this? Right? You start to wonder, like, is my competitor doing this?
Yeah. And you're thinking, well, if they are, I got to stay ahead of them. So I got to keep reading.
Keep reading. Yeah.
Well, this has been amazing, Paul. I really appreciate you sharing this deal with us today.
Yeah, Derek. Thanks for having me on. This has been fun.
Oh, and if people wanted to reach out to you further, what's the best way?
So we're expanding our top 1%er private sales community. We're going to revamp our top1percenter.com. So that's the best place to head to.
So top1percenter.com.
You got it. Yep. All spelled out.
Okay. That's the best way to reach you?
Correct. Or LinkedIn.
Okay. Or LinkedIn. Perfect. Well, I'll make sure I put that in the show notes. Well, hey, that's it for today's session, everybody. Thank you so much, Paul, for helping all of our B2B salespeople out there improve their skills today with your deal. And for our listeners, if you'd like today's highlights, be sure to check out our summary on modernSalesTraining.com. I'll put all the information about getting in touch with Paul and even joining his top 1%er community on there. So have a great sales week, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Hey, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, then you have to come check out our free Top Performer Academy course. Inside it, I'll give you 12 sales tips that only the best salespeople do on a daily basis. Tips ranging from cold calling to running effective appointments, handling objections, and creating urgency in your deals. You can get it 100% free at www.modernSalesTraining.com/free. That's modernSalesTraining.com/free. These 12 tips could be the difference between you having a good month or an incredible one. I hope to see you there.